They said The View booked Denzel Washington to discuss his latest film and the state of American discourse. The producers expected charm, reflection, a few sound bites, but no fireworks. That was the plan. When Denzel stepped onto the set, he carried himself with his familiar, quiet poise. He greeted the hosts with firm handshakes and warm smiles. There were polite nods and brief laughter, but you could sense a question under the surface. What does he really think about our divisions? Joy Behar smiled broadly. She said, "Welcome back to The View, Denzel Washington. We're thrilled to have you. Let's talk about your new film and also how Hollywood engages with today's culture." Denzel nodded. He said, "Happy to be here." Whoopi chimed in. She said, "Your new film is rooted in reconciliation and intergenerational healing. It's timely. Why tell this story now?" Denzel said softly, "Because people need stories that remind them healing isn't passive. It takes strength, humility, work." Sarah Haynes said, "Faith is central to it. Do you think our culture has lost sight of moral roots?" Denzel said, "When you only look out for yourself, you forget there are others who matter too. That's a moral loss." Clips rolled for a moment, lighter content, applause, but then they steered into current affairs. Sonny Hostin said, "Denzel, you've spoken about unity before. What worries you most about where we are now?" Denzel said, "When conversation becomes noise, when difference becomes threat, that's what worries me." Joy leaned forward, tone lively. She said, "So difference is threatening? Isn't that overstating it?" Denzel studied her. He paused, thoughtful, then said, "Not difference itself. The refusal to listen to difference, that's the threat." Joy laughed. She said, "Turn on cable news. That's missing nuance, not just unwillingness." Denzel said quietly, "It's easy to label nuance as noise when you don't want to hear it." Joy's smile stiffened. She said, "You're telling me to listen?" Denzel said, "I'm telling all of us to do it more than we do." The room tensed. The other hosts waited, sensing the shift. Whoopi tried to reset. She said, "Let's talk about concrete issues, like student debt forgiveness. Public opinion shows majority support. Is it time?" Denzel said, "If we owe that debt, we pay it. Everybody pays a share. But if some pay and others don't, that's not forgiveness. That's division." Joy said quickly, "So no cancellation of student debt?" Denzel said, "Let forgiveness be real, balanced, not one-sided." Joy shook her head. She said, "That's the problem with people like you. You say forgiveness, but you want to hold power over who gets it." Denzel paused, then looked directly at her. He said, "That's the problem too many of us have. We think forgiveness demands giving up principles. It doesn't. It demands keeping them." Joy's expression flickered. She said, "So who picks the principles?" "The people." Denzel said, "Yes, the people." Joy asked, "But aren't principles set by leadership?" Denzel said calmly, "Leadership listens before it leads. That's the difference." A beat of silence. The hosts exchanged glances. Whoopi attempted to pivot. She said, "Denzel, Republicans say this is out of control. Democrats say Republicans are in denial. Your take?" Denzel said, "Polarity happens when listening ends. That's what worries me." Joy said sharply, "So you blame listening failures on both sides, but you're free to say it on our stage." Denzel said, "Yes, because this is a stage, not a microphone. Saying it doesn't make it happen. We have to live it." Joy said, "So what? You lecture us." Denzel said, "Not lecture. Invite." Joy's tone hardened. She said, "Invitations aren't always welcome." Denzel looked at her clearly. He said, "That's the problem with people like you. You hear the invitation as criticism. That's the problem." The lights dimmed for a brief break before tension could snap. The show came back from break with laughter that felt forced. Music played. Whoopi welcomed viewers again, but the air had changed. Something had shifted, subtle, but irreversible. Sarah Haynes tried to reframe the energy. She said, "We're back with Denzel Washington. Earlier we talked about forgiveness and leadership. Let's talk about your career. Do you ever feel pressure to say what people want to hear? Denzel smiled slightly. He said, pressure's always there. But peace comes when you say what you believe, not what sells. Alyssa Farah Griffin nodded. She said, that's rare these days, especially when everyone's afraid of being canceled. Denzel said, I don't fear being canceled. I fear being quiet when something needs to be said. Joy Behar glanced at the audience, then back at Denzel. She said, something like what? What exactly needs to be said that hasn't already been screamed on cable news? Denzel's tone didn't change. He said, that dignity still matters. That we're not enemies just because we disagree. That moral clarity isn't loud, it's consistent. Joy said, that's easy for you to say. You've got Oscars. You've got protection. Denzel looked at her for a long moment. He said, protection? You mean I can afford to speak? So can you, Joy. You speak every day. But what do you use it for? Joy's voice rose. She said, for the truth. Denzel said, the truth or your version of it? She leaned forward. She said, you think I'm dishonest? He said, I think when we stop asking questions and start preaching certainty, we lose honesty. Whoopi tried again to ease the tone. She said, let's shift to something we can all agree on. The country's divided. What heals that? Denzel said, honest conversation. Not performance. Not applause lines. Not moral showboating. Joy said, so this is performance? Denzel said, only if it ends when the cameras do. Joy pressed harder. She said, tell me, Denzel, what do you think the vice president should be doing right now? He answered without hesitation. He said, listening more than talking. Joy smirked. She said, some would say she's doing her best. Denzel said, best isn't enough if it doesn't serve people. Joy folded her arms. She said, sounds like criticism. He said, it's responsibility. If someone can't carry the weight, they shouldn't hold the role. A stunned silence fell. Sarah asked cautiously, are you saying Kamala Harris isn't fit to serve? Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his tone. He said, I'm saying if the job is about leading the people and you lose sight of the people, you should consider stepping aside. Joy stared. She said, you're telling the vice president to resign? Denzel said, I'm saying the office demands more than symbolism. It demands results. The tension in the room was suffocating now. No one moved. Whoopi finally said, all right, we need to take another break. But even as the cameras faded to commercial, everyone knew they weren't coming back to the same stage. They returned from commercial, but the usual studio rhythm was gone. No music, no jokes, just quiet. Whoopi Goldberg spoke slowly. She said, we're back with Denzel Washington. Before the break, we got into some real talk. Maybe more real than some of us expected. Denzel didn't smile. He said, sometimes truth shows up uninvited. Sarah Haynes tried to redirect. She said, Denzel, let's talk legacy. How do you want to be remembered? He looked down for a moment, then up. He said, as someone who told the truth, even when it cost something. Joy Behar, still sitting upright, said, you're suggesting Kamala Harris should resign. That's a big thing to say. He said, it's not personal. But public trust is personal. When leaders fail to connect, the people carry the weight. That's what we keep forgetting. Joy said, and what qualifies you to make that judgment? Denzel said, nothing, except being a citizen. And caring. Joy leaned in. She said, you're a great actor. But this isn't a movie. This is real life. He said, exactly. And in real life, we can't pretend performance is policy. Alyssa Farah Griffin said quietly, we need more honesty like that, even when it's hard to hear. Whoopi said, we've had a lot of hard truths today, but let's end with one last question. Denzel, what do you think America needs most right now? He paused, then said, humility, courage, and leaders who don't just hold power, but carry it carefully. Joy didn't respond. She sat still, blinking hard. The segment ended not with applause, but with a stillness that hung in the air. Later that night, the clip of Denzel saying, "If someone can't carry the weight, they shouldn't hold the role," went viral. The reactions were split. Some called it disrespectful. Others called it brave. Kamala Harris's team declined to comment. Denzel made no follow-up statements. He didn't need to, because sometimes a single voice telling the truth with calm, quiet clarity is more powerful than 1,000 shouting in anger. And when the noise fades, those words remain. This is the USA Liberty. If you've ever watched the world go silent after a single honest sentence, you already understand what we're building here. Subscribe not because you agree, but because you believe silence isn't always neutral and truth isn't always loud. It's just real, and that makes it worth hearing.